Well, good evening and welcome back to the Cincinnati Kids Vintage Baseball Card Channel. Tonight I have for you a VR response to TJMAC Vintage Cards and Nostalgia. Terry at TJMAC had a video out over the weekend and he asked us, and I'm not sure he wanted actually a VR response, but at least in the comments below, what 10-year time period would you think you would most likely collect in or focus on collecting maybe in the next year or so? And hopefully these cards that are up here now will give a bit of a suggestion of, after some pondering and thought, of what I've decided to come up with. He mentioned that it did not have to be a decade, so it could be part of one decade and part of another. So it could be, say, from the mid-70s to the mid-80s, or from the mid-40s to the mid-50s. Perhaps like the last couple of years of a decade, and then the next 8 of the current decade, the later decade. But I gave it some serious thought and pondering and thought about sets that were important to me, and 3 baseball sets in particular come to mind that are my favorites from all vintage card collecting. It is 1956 Topps baseball, which oddly enough I don't have one out here, a 56 Topps baseball card out here. It's bad for me. But good for you, so you'll be able to see some more in future videos. The 1960 baseball set, or Topps baseball set, and the 1965 Topps baseball set. It also is an area that I could explore more in football, which I've started to collect more football cards recently. And as you see displayed here, I have a card from the 50s and 1960 Topps. So there's avenues there to explore, and there's also the 1960 Fleer, 1961 Fleer football set, which have some really cool designs and really cool images of players on them. Also, the 1958 Topps baseball is a kind of an honorable mention favorite of mine as well, and so it's included in this time period I've picked. And branching over into hockey, there are some great late 50s cards that I would like to collect, and one of them is, of course, recently acquired 57-58 Topps Andy Bathgate. You see up there in the left-hand corner by perhaps one of my all-time favorite cards, and possibly my favorite 65 Topps card, Ernie Banks. There's lots of memories in these cards as I look at these. The Bomber's Best, the 63 Topps card with Mickey Mantle, and Bobby Richardson, and Tom Tresh remind me of TJMAC, and the video he had that explained the crossing of the bats to make St. Andrew's Cross. The one immediately to its left, the Camille Pasquale card, is a card I've had a long time. Just recently got it back from grading. Went with SGC. It just looks better in the SGC slab to me for this card of this era. And it's my favorite Camille Pasquale card, but it also reminds me of another YouTuber that we haven't heard from for a while, because he's been really busy. He's got a new job, and I know he'll be back at some point, but wanted to give a shout out to I just went blank. Sammy at SFI Sports Cards. You're missed in the community. Just wanted you to know that. Thinking about you, and I have a connection with you with this card because you have one as well. I think yours is a 7, so it's even nicer than mine. I've had this Camille Pasquale card from the early days of my collecting vintage. Never ever parted with it, and Just love that card. And then below you see the football card there of Concrete Charlie, Chuck Bednarik, Hall of Famer for the Eagles. The 2-for-1 shot there. With him look like he's about ready to annihilate somebody, and then a nice portrait of him. But there was one thing that was missing when I thought about selecting the time period that I'm going with. And it's my growing love for Bowman football and baseball cards. And I thought there has to be a way to include at least 1 year of Bowman cards. And with 55 being the last year for the baseball, and the TV set 55 Bowman has really grown on me in the last year or so. I've picked up a few of those. I thought I have to include these two, but in order to do that and to keep 1965 in there, I have to break Terry's rule by a little bit. And that's okay, because I call the shots on my channel. I think Terry would be okay with giving me a year's mulligan or wiggle room. I'm a contrarian. I don't go with the flow as much, and less I find I do here on my channel with maybe what others are doing. But Terry's a huge influence of mine, and I'm kind of gearing my channel towards and trying to tell more stories with the cards that I have, without entirely mimicking what he does. I do think he is a big influence of how my future videos are going to go. So with that, I will reveal, for my VR response to Terry, the decade I've chosen is a decade plus one, from 1955 to 1965. So I get a little bit of Bowman, I get my 65 top set in, which I'm really happy about, and areas to explore cards in football and hockey as well, and to increase the 50s collection a little bit more as well. Another reason is this time period in history was one of somewhat relatively international peace for the United States, from a historical perspective. The Korean War had recently ended. We weren't quite fully engaged putting troops into Vietnam yet, still just advisors. Perhaps the Red Scare was, and McCarthyism was probably the thing of the day in the 50s that was a challenge. Gary Powers was certainly shot down on the U-2 plane in the late 50s, just before President Eisenhower's term was over. So there were obviously international and internal challenges to the United States, not unlike we are facing today. So I think it's a good reflection of that. But yet the sports went on. These guys performed at a high level and provided a respite for the American public during trying times. And times were certainly getting even more trying as civil rights and other issues that would come up in the late 60s. But also great things would happen. Space exploration was starting to occur. We were entering into the Mercury and Gemini, or Gemini if you prefer, astronauts going up into space on a regular basis. It was a great time for American pride to shine that beacon and light on the hill to the rest of the world of freedom and democracy. So I am going to go with 1955 to 65. Thank you all for some recent new persons that have subscribed to my channel. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And to all my current subscribers that have been around and continue to comment on my channel, I appreciate you so very much. And with that, I wish you good night and good luck.